I saw my business buddy turn $10,000 into $12 billion over 60 years. I witnessed him accomplish this without any luck, without having insider info, and without any single genius move that you or I couldn't copy. And during those same 60 years, I observed countless smart, diligent, educated folks earn more cash than we did in any single year, yet end up with nearly nothing. Doctors earning $500,000 a year, who retired with nothing. Lawyers charging $400 an hour, who passed away in debt. Engineers, executives, entrepreneurs, people way smarter than me in their own fields, who built up nothing despite decades of high earnings. The key difference wasn't about smarts or how hard they worked. It was about a few choices they made regarding where to invest their money. More specifically, it was 7 types of investments they put their wealth into that I completely steered clear of. Not because I was exceptionally smart, but because I had observed the math, delved into the history, and seen enough folks lose a significant amount of cash to spot a trend. What I'm about to share with you isn't just a theory, it's not a guess. It's based on 7 decades of watching money shift from one hand to another and noticing which hands always seemed to run dry while others kept growing steadily. These 7 types of investments wiped out more wealth among people I knew personally than market downturns, bad luck, and poor timing all put together. The sad part is that most of them were just following the usual advice, doing exactly what financial experts, their parents, and society told them was the smart, safe, and responsible thing to do. The first wealth destroyer I managed to steer clear of my whole life was something that 90% of Americans eagerly bought, something that financial advisors built entire careers around selling, something that had the word investment right in its title, even though it turned out to be one of the worst investments ever made. Whole life coverage, universal life, variable life, and all those different types of permanent life insurance that claimed to mix protection with investment growth. The sales pitch was pretty tempting. They'd say you need life insurance anyway, so why not grab a policy that builds cash value you can tap into or take out during retirement? You're not just getting coverage, you're creating an asset. Tax-free growth, guaranteed returns, the security of insurance paired with investment growth. It all sounded amazing, but it was really a mathematical trap. Here's what they never made clear. When you purchase whole life insurance, about 50 to 100% of your premiums in the first year go straight to the agent as commission, not into your cash value, but into their wallet. You pay $5,000, they pocket $5,000. You receive insurance coverage and pretty much nothing in your cash value account. Over the next 10 years, the insurance company gradually and reluctantly starts putting some of your premiums into this so-called investment account, after taking out costs for insurance, admin fees, mortality charges, and profit margins. By the time you hit year 15 or 20, if you're fortunate and haven't given up on the policy out of sheer frustration, you might see a cash value that matches what you've put in. Those returns they promised, like 4% or 5%, sometimes even more, weren't actually on your total premiums. They were based on the cash value after all those deductions. I saw a buddy of mine pay $5,000 every year into a whole life policy from the age of 30 to 60. That's 30 years, totaling $150,000 in premiums. When he turned 60, his cash value was $168,000. That's just $18,000 in growth over 3 decades. That's a measly 0.4% annual return. If he had opted for $20 a month in term insurance for the same death benefit and invested the difference, $4,760 a year, into the stock market, averaging 10%, he would have ended up with $870,000. The gap between $168,000 and $870,000 is a whopping $702,000. That's what whole life insurance ended up costing him, not in fees, but in the missed opportunities for wealth he could have accumulated but didn't. All because someone convinced him that insurance and investment should be bundled together. They really shouldn't be. Insurance is meant for managing risk, while investment is all about growing wealth. Merging the two is like getting a car that's also a boat. It does both jobs poorly, costs more than buying each one separately, and the salesperson rakes in a huge profit from selling it to you. I never went for permanent life insurance. Instead, I opted for affordable term insurance when my kids were little and I had responsibilities. Once I had built enough wealth so that my passing wouldn't financially ruin my family, I let it go. The cash I saved by not investing in whole life insurance grew in businesses and stocks over 50 years. That choice alone likely added 8 figures to my net worth. Not because I was particularly clever, but because I realized that when someone's paycheck relies on you purchasing something, their advice on whether you should buy it is pretty much useless. The entire life insurance sector operates on a clever deception. They take people's genuine desire for security, toss in a bunch of complicated terms that folks don't really get, and then pay salespeople hefty commissions to promote products that aren't necessary, all while dressing it up in the talk of financial responsibility. Thinking about your family, planning for your future, acting like a responsible grown-up. It's pretty brilliant, to be honest. They managed to take the worst investment option ever and convinced a whole generation that it was a smart move. I saw this same buddy, the one who racked up $168,000 in cash value over 3 decades, stand up for his whole life insurance policy even after I laid out the numbers for him. He had been shelling out premiums for 25 years when we had this chat. I posed him a straightforward question. If you could rewind to when you were 30, knowing everything you know now, would you pick this policy again? He paused for quite a while. No, he confessed, definitely not. So, I asked, why are you still dishing out those premiums now? Since I've already put in so much, Zig Ziglar mentioned. I can't just turn my back on 25 years of payments. That's when it hit me that the insurance company had come out on top. They had persuaded him that sticking with a poor investment was somehow preferable to owning up to a mistake and shifting his funds to something that genuinely created wealth. This is the sunk cost fallacy at its finest, and it keeps folks stuck in wealth-draining products for years on end. The insurance agent who sold him that policy raked in $50,000 in commissions throughout the policy's duration. My buddy saw just $18,000 in growth. The insurance company pocketed hundreds of thousands in profit. Everyone profited except the individual who truly needed to accumulate wealth. That's not an investment. That's a transfer of wealth from those who aren't financially savvy to those who are financially predatory. The second investment I steered clear of was something that many people based their retirement dreams on. Here's a rephrased version of your text, something that society has long viewed as the cornerstone of financial stability. It's a mix of significant leverage, illiquid assets, and transaction fees that would make a loan shark turn red. I'm talking about real estate, but not your main home. I'll tackle that topic later. What I mean is investment real estate, rental units, vacation spots you convince yourself are investments, commercial properties, and real estate investment trusts. The whole belief system around owning property is about building wealth. The sales pitch was even more enticing than life insurance because it was wrapped up in the American dream. Buy property, see it increase in value, collect rent, build equity, use other people's money through mortgages, and retire wealthy. I've heard it countless times. I've seen hundreds of folks take that route, and with very few exceptions, those who purchased a lot of properties in booming areas and held on to them through various market cycles ended up losing wealth compared to simply owning businesses through stocks. Here's the math that often gets overlooked when folks are trying to sell you on real estate. First up, let's talk about transaction costs. When you purchase a property, you're looking at closing costs that usually range from 3 to 5%. And when it's time to sell, you'll be paying realtor fees, which typically sit around 6%. So if you buy a property worth $500,000, you're already down $15,000 to $30,000 just in transaction costs before you've even seen a dime from rent or appreciation. Now, think about buying stocks instead. With modern brokerages, you're looking at zero transaction costs. Next, we have carrying costs. Property taxes in most states hover around 1 to 2% of the property's value each year. Homeowners insurance adds another 1% to that. Maintenance can average 1 to 2% annually, and that's assuming nothing major goes wrong. So you're shelling out 3 to 5% of the property's value every year just to keep it. For a property worth $500,000, that means you're spending around $15,000 to $25,000 each year on taxes, insurance, and maintenance. And that's not even counting mortgage interest if you're using leverage. Lastly, let's discuss illiquidity. When I want to sell a stock, I just click a button and have cash in my account within 2 days. When you're looking to sell a piece of property, you put it on the market, wait for someone interested, negotiate a deal, go through the escrow process, and if luck is on your side, you might see some cash in about 90 days. But if things don't go your way, like if the market's off or the economy takes a hit, you could be waiting for years or end up selling at a loss. Then there's the issue of depreciation and obsolescence. Properties get older, roofs need to be replaced, and HVAC systems can fail. Neighborhoods can change too. On the other hand, the businesses I own through stocks don't have leaky roofs, tenants who stop paying rent, or foundations that crack. They just keep generating earnings that grow over time. And let's not forget about leverage. It can be a double-edged sword. Everyone loves to talk about using mortgage leverage to control $1 million property with just $200,000 down. What they often overlook is that if the property loses 20% of its value, you're not just losing 20%, you're actually losing 100%. Your $200,000 in equity can vanish completely. I saw this happen to some really smart folks back in 2008. Doctors, lawyers, engineers who had built up millions in home equity and rental properties, all leveraged, all convinced that real estate only goes up. They ended up losing it all. Not because they were lacking smarts, but because they didn't get that leverage can amplify losses just as powerfully as it boosts profits. I crunched the numbers back in 1965, and the results were obvious. Over extended periods, stocks beat out real estate by about 2 to 3 percentage points each year. That doesn't seem like a lot. Over 4 decades, it's the difference between $1 turning into $15 or 45. It's what separates a cozy retirement from building wealth for future generations. But everyone was all about real estate because it was something they could see, feel, and drive by. They just couldn't visualize owning a piece of a business, so they went for properties and spent their weekends fixing toilets and handling tenants. Meanwhile, I invested in stocks and spent my weekends with my nose in a book. Fast forward 40 years, and I had a lot more wealth than I had time. They owned properties that appreciated roughly with inflation and carried decades of memories dealing with troublesome renters. Now, let me clarify what I'm not implying. I'm not saying that owning a home is a bad idea. I'm not saying that real estate doesn't have a spot in an investment portfolio. What I'm getting at is that for a lot of folks, investing in property is more of a trap dressed up as a chance. It plays into our craving for physical assets, our belief that we can keep an eye on and manage our investments, and our cultural stories about owning property. But the numbers can be harsh. A buddy of mine picked up 3 rental homes back in the 1990s. He shelled out around $200,000 each, totaling $600,000. He spent 2 decades managing them, handling repairs, evictions, property taxes, and insurance claims. He sold them in 2015 for about $350,000 each, which adds up to roughly $1 million. Sounds like a success, right? He more than doubled his investment, but when you take into account all the ongoing costs, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, empty periods, and property management, if he brought in help, his actual return was closer to 4% a year, and that doesn't even include the countless hours he spent tackling tenant problems, emergency repairs, and all the administrative headaches. If he had taken that same $600,000 and invested it in an S&P 500 index fund, he would have ended up with around $2.4 million by 2015, all without spending any time on it or dealing with late-night calls about broken water heaters. The gap between $1 million and $2.4 million is $1.4 million, plus 20 years of his life spent as a landlord instead of doing literally anything else. That's the opportunity cost that often goes unnoticed when folks are buying rental properties. The third type of investment I steered clear of was something even more culturally revered than real estate. It's something people have literally fought over for thousands of years. It's meant to be the ultimate safe haven and a buffer against disaster. I'm talking about gold, silver, precious metals, and commodities that don't produce anything, don't generate cash flow, and just sit in a vault somewhere while you cross your fingers hoping someone will pay you more for them tomorrow than you did today. This might just be the most irrational investment humans have ever come up with. I have spent 7 decades observing smart folks invest their money into gold for reasons that fall apart with just a bit of logical thinking. So here's the case for gold. It's been seen as valuable for 5,000 years. It's supposed to protect against inflation. It's a safe haven when paper currency loses its value. It's something you can hold, and it's limited in supply. Governments can't just print more of it. While all that is technically accurate, it's also totally irrelevant when it comes to actually building wealth. Let me break down the real numbers behind owning gold. From 1975 to 2023, which is 48 years, the price of gold went from around $165 an ounce to about $2,000 an ounce. That's roughly 12 times your investment, which sounds great until you stack it up against any productive asset. During that same time frame, the stock market investment number 3, gold and precious metals, increased by about 90 times. $1 put into stocks back in 1975 turned into $90. Meanwhile, $1 invested in gold only grew to $12. And it gets even worse because gold comes with carrying costs. If you decide to purchase physical gold, you've got to find a secure place to keep it. Storing it at home puts you at risk of theft. On the other hand, if you opt for a safe deposit box or a vault service, you'll be paying annual fees. And if you invest in gold through an exchange-traded fund, there are management fees to consider. So that 12 times return might shrink down to around 10 times after you factor in those carrying costs. Meanwhile, stocks have been dishing out dividends that compound over those 48 years. This could turn that 90 times return into something closer to 150 times if you reinvest those dividends. The difference between gold and stocks isn't just significant. It's the contrast between generational wealth and modest gains. But let's be real. Folks don't buy gold for the returns. They buy it for security, as a hedge against crises, and because they believe that when everything falls apart, gold will still hold its value. Now, let me share what really goes down during a crisis. I experienced stagflation in the 1970s, Black Monday in 1987, the dot-com bust, the financial meltdown in 2008, and the pandemic. You know what maintained its value in every one of those tough times? ownership and thriving companies. Businesses that created what folks really needed, offered services that were in demand, and brought in cash flow regardless of how the currency fared. Gold saw a spike during some of those tough times, but then it dropped again. Meanwhile, companies continued to make profits. Here's the core issue with gold that people seem to overlook. It's not really an investment. It's more about speculation. Investing means putting your money into something that yields a return. Like a business that makes money, a bond that gives you interest, or real estate that brings in rent. Gold just sits there. You purchase it, keep it safe, and hope someone will buy it from you for more later. That's not true investing. That's the greater fool theory. You're wagering that a bigger fool will pay more than what you did for something that doesn't produce anything. I've never bought gold. Not even an ounce, not for protection, not for insurance, and certainly not for speculation. Every dollar that could have gone into gold was instead invested in businesses. For more than 70 years, that choice has turned into a gap in wealth so enormous that I can't even begin to figure it out accurately. If I had invested 10% of my total assets in gold back in 1965, which a lot of financial experts suggested, I would be millions poorer today. Millions. And I would have spent 7 decades fretting about whether society was on the brink of collapse instead of diving into annual reports and figuring out how businesses operate. The mental toll of owning gold is something that hardly anyone talks about. Gold enthusiasts are the most anxious, gloomy, and consistently let down investors I've ever encountered. They're always on edge, waiting for the downfall, the runaway inflation, the currency crisis that will finally validate their beliefs. Meanwhile, life goes on, companies keep producing, and the stock market continues to grow. I once asked a gold investor what it would take for him to acknowledge that gold was a poor investment. He couldn't provide an answer because for true gold supporters, there's no way to disprove their theory. If gold increases in value, they were correct. If it decreases, it's just a temporary manipulation and they should grab more. If gold stays flat for many years, it's just holding its value while everything else is inflated. It's the ultimate unprovable investment theory, which means it's not really a theory at all. It's more like a belief system, and like most belief systems, it gives people a sense of security without actually enhancing their financial situation. The fourth type of investment I steered clear of was something that mixed the worst aspects of whole life insurance and real estate. You've got high fees, lack of liquidity, disappointing returns, and a level of complexity that hides how bad the deal really is. Actively managed mutual funds, hedge funds, private equity funds, any investment option where you're paying someone else, typically 1 to 2% each year, plus extra fees based on performance to handle your money. This could be the most profitable con in financial history, and it thrived for years because it tapped into a basic human flaw. The idea that professionals can achieve what we can't and that it's worth shelling out for better returns is something I want to challenge with some numbers. On average, a managed mutual fund takes about 1.3% in annual fees. At first glance, that doesn't seem like a lot. You might hardly notice it when you check your quarterly statement. However, over a span of 30 years, that 1.3% fee can eat away at roughly 35% of your total returns. And just to clarify, that's not 35% of your fees. It's 35% of your entire wealth. If the market gives you a 10% return each year and you're paying 1.3% in fees, you're not actually pocketing 8.7%. Thanks to compounding, you're really only seeing about 6.5%. And that's if your fund manager can keep up with the market returns before fees, which, let's be honest, 95% of them fail to do over the long haul. The statistics are pretty harsh for the active management scene. When you look at 15-year spans, Around 92% of active fund managers fall short of their benchmark index after accounting for fees. Stretch that out to 20 years and it jumps to 95%. And over 30 years, it's nearly 98%. So if you decide to go with a fund that's actively managed, your chances of outpacing a basic index fund that only charges a tiny fee of 0.03% and doesn't need any special know-how to invest in are just 2%. Those aren't great odds. It's pretty much a guarantee that you'll underperform. Yet, the mutual fund sector is a massive $3 trillion industry. They're really skilled at convincing you to overlook the facts. They highlight the funds that actually did outperform the market while conveniently ignoring the survivorship bias. They don't mention the countless funds that shut down because they were doing so poorly. They parade past performance in front of you, disregarding the fact that what happened before doesn't mean it'll happen again. They hype up the skills of their managers, overlooking that even brilliance can't make up for a 1.3% annual drag plus underperformance. I remember seeing my coworkers pour money into hedge funds back in the 80s and 90s when hedge funds were all the rage. They charged a 2% annual management fee, along with 20% of any profits over a certain limit. The whole idea was that these managers were incredibly talented, super well-connected, and really smart, so they could pull off returns that would outshine the market even after taking those hefty fees into account. Some of them did for a bit, but most never really did. Even the ones that managed to deliver impressive returns encountered a peculiar issue. As they expanded and pulled in more money, their returns started to even out with the average. The advantage vanished. But those fees, they stayed the same. I ran into a hedge fund manager back in 2003 who was raking in 30% annual returns for 5 years straight. Sharp guy. He had an MBA from Wharton, had worked at Goldman Sachs, and developed his own trading system. He was overseeing about $50 million. I asked him what he thought would happen to his returns if he suddenly had to manage $5 billion instead of $50 million. He went silent for a moment, then confessed that his strategy wouldn't be able to scale up. His edge in investment number 4, actively managed funds, thrived in small, inefficient niches of the market that just couldn't handle large amounts of capital. If he had $5 billion, he would need to approach investing in a different way, and his returns might drop to around 15% or even lower. However, he would still take a 2.20 fee on that $5 billion, which means he would personally rake in over $100 million each year, even if his investors only saw 12 or 13% after all the fees were taken out. That's when it hit me that the hedge fund game wasn't really about making investors wealthy. It was all about lining the pockets of hedge fund managers. The way they set things up was fantastic for them, but pretty rough for the investors. They earned their money based on the assets they managed and their performance during good years, but they didn't return any cash during the bad years. It was a win for them no matter what, while investors were left holding the bag. I never put a single dollar into a hedge fund. Once index funds came onto the scene, I never bought an actively managed mutual fund either. Every dollar I could have handed over to a so-called expert went straight into low-cost index funds or individual stocks that I looked into myself. Over the span of 40 years, that probably made a difference of $50 million or more in my personal net worth. Not because I was more clever than hedge fund managers, but because I wasn't shelling out 1 to 2% each year for them to underperform what I could achieve for just 0.03%. The math behind fees is the key idea in investing that no one talks about. If you've got $1 million invested and you're paying 1.3% in fees every year, after 30 years with a 10% market return, you'll end up with around $13 million. But if you put that same million into an index fund that charges only 0.03%, you'll see about $20 million. That's a $7 million difference just from that 1.3%. That's not just a small mistake, that's wealth that could have been passed down to future generations, but instead, it's going to the financial services industry, and folks are okay with it because they don't realize that compounding affects both sides. It boosts your returns and it also increases your fees. The industry is well aware of this. That's why they draw your focus to performance and hide the fee details. That's why they show returns before fees in their promotional materials. That's why they make fee structures complicated and tough to compare. They're not out to make you wealthy. They're focused on squeezing out the highest fees while delivering the least value. And they've been pulling this off for 70 years. The fifth investment I steered clear of was something that didn't even exist for most of my career. But then it took off in the 2000s and turned into the major speculative craze of the 21st century. Cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum, or whatever new coin is being hyped this week is supposedly the future of money. I observed this unfold with a mix of intrigue and dread because it had every aspect of financial delusion I had witnessed over 7 decades. The tulip craze, the South Sea bubble, the dot-com bust. The idea that this time it's different, that economic rules don't apply, that you can strike it rich without creating anything of real value. Let me be crystal clear about my stance on cryptocurrency. It's not a currency since no one actually uses it to buy stuff. It's not a reliable store of value because it swings up and down dramatically. It's not a valuable asset since it doesn't produce any cash flow. It's not a commodity either because it lacks any practical use. It's just a digital token whose worth is solely determined by what someone else is willing to pay for it, making it the ultimate example of greater fool speculation ever invented. The reasons for supporting cryptocurrency crumble under even the slightest examination. First off, there's the scarcity argument. They claim Bitcoin is capped at 21 million coins, which supposedly gives it intrinsic value. But scarcity alone doesn't create value. It's usefulness that brings value. I could whip up a limited digital asset right now. There will only ever be 21 million mere coins out there. Does that make them worth anything? Absolutely not. It's the combination of scarcity and demand that creates value. And the only kind of demand for cryptocurrency is speculative demand. People purchase it, hoping that someone will pay more for it tomorrow. That's not real value. That's just like musical shares. Then there's the decentralization argument. They say cryptocurrency is free from government oversight, which supposedly makes it better than traditional currency. Putting aside the reality that a majority of cryptocurrency trades occur through centralized exchanges that governments can and do oversee, let me pose a straightforward question. Why is having freedom from government oversight important? The response from crypto fans is that governments dilute currency via inflation, which is accurate. However, the alternative they suggest, a deflationary currency that appreciates over time, brings about its own significant issues. If your currency gains value just by holding on to it, no one is going to use it. Economic activity comes to a standstill. We've seen this throughout history. The gold standard caused deflationary cycles that resulted in economic downturns. That's why all developed nations shifted to fiat currency, not because governments craved control, but because deflationary currencies fail to function effectively as means of exchange. Lastly, there's the argument about blockchain technology. Even if cryptocurrencies don't succeed, they claim that blockchain technology will transform everything. Perhaps you don't have to own Bitcoin to take advantage of blockchain technology, just like you didn't need to have shares in pets.com to enjoy the benefits of the internet. Most groundbreaking technologies don't necessarily make their initial investors wealthy. Instead, They enhance the lives of users and generate value in surprising ways. The internet didn't turn most of its investors into millionaires. It made companies like Amazon, Google, and Facebook incredibly rich. And many of those businesses weren't even around during the internet boom. I saw Bitcoin rise from 1,000 to 20,000, then drop to 3,000, climb back to 60,000, and fall to 20,000 again. Each surge drew in fresh investors, all thinking they had discovered the key to effortless riches. Each downturn wiped out those investors and paved the way for the next surge. It's a never-ending cycle of greed and fear. The only ones who consistently come out ahead are the early adopters who got in at rock-bottom prices and the exchanges that rake in fees on every trade. I've never invested in cryptocurrency, not a single dollar, not as a guess, not as a safeguard against government currency, and definitely not because I believed I had a grasp on the tech. Every reason I came across for why I should invest in it sounded just like the reasons I heard back in 1999 for why I should jump on board with Pets.com, Webvan, and eToys. Revolutionary tech, first mover advantage, network effects. Sure, all of that was spot on regarding the technology, but it had nothing to do with the actual returns on investment. Those companies went belly up while the tech itself flourished. The same scenario is likely to unfold with cryptocurrency. Some form of blockchain tech will probably evolve into the infrastructure we all rely on without even realizing it, much like TCP/IP protocols. Meanwhile, those who bought Bitcoin at $50,000 will likely see most of their cash evaporate because technological revolutions and investment returns are two entirely different beasts. Amazing technology often leads to awful investments. Investment number 5, cryptocurrency investments. The ideal moment to put your money into a tech venture isn't when it's all the rage and everyone's buzzing about it. It's actually when it's kind of dull yet still raking in profits and generating cash flow. Back in 1999, Amazon wasn't a smart investment when it was the talk of the town. It became a solid choice in 2003 after it took a nosedive, figured out its business strategy, and began to see steady profits. Cryptocurrency doesn't have a clear route to making money because it's not a real business. It's just a speculative token, and speculative tokens eventually revert to their true value, which, in the case of something that doesn't produce anything useful, is pretty much zero. Folks get upset when I mention this. They say I don't get the technology, that I'm just an old-timer afraid of change, that I've let a golden opportunity slip by maybe. But I've been hearing that I don't grasp the next big thing for 70 years, and I've seen those who claim to know it lose a ton of money. All right, so I built my wealth through some pretty straightforward businesses that created products and brought in profits. I'd choose that deal every single time. The 6th type of investment I steered clear of was something that, oddly enough, was quite trendy among folks who thought of themselves as savvy investors. People who had read the right books, grasped the theories, and aimed to fine-tune their returns with scientific accuracy. We're talking about individual bonds, corporate bonds, municipal bonds, treasury bonds, any fixed income security where you lend cash to an entity in return for a promised interest rate. At first glance, bonds appear to be the safest and most logical investment out there. You know exactly what you'll earn and when you'll get it. No ups and downs, no surprises, just consistent, reliable returns. The catch is that those consistent returns can actually lead to a steady decline in wealth once you take inflation and taxes into account. Let me break down the numbers for you. A 10-year Treasury bond today gives you about 4%. Sounds fair enough, but inflation is hanging around 3% each year. This means your actual return, once you factor in inflation, is just 1%. Then there's taxes. If you find yourself in the 37% tax bracket, which is where most high earners land, you'll be handing over 1.48% of that 4% to the government, leaving you with just 2.52%. Take away 3% inflation from that 2.52% nominal return, and you're looking at a real after-tax return of negative 0.48%. That's right, you're gradually losing your buying power. You're essentially getting poorer, and in a way that's pretty predictable. But hey, bonds are considered safe, right? People like to claim you'll get your principal back. That's true if you're talking nominally, but completely false in real terms. Let's say you invest $100,000 in bonds that yield 4% for 30 years. You'll end up with your $100,000 back along with your interest payments. But that $100,000 will only buy what about 41,000 buys today after 3% annual inflation. You've managed to keep your nominal capital intact but lost 59% of your buying power. That doesn't sound like safety at all. It sounds like guaranteed financial decline. The only time bonds really made sense as an investment was when interest rates were above inflation plus taxes. This all went down in the early 1980s when Zig Ziglar raised interest rates to tackle inflation, and you could snag treasury bonds that were paying out 15% while inflation was sitting at 10%. A real return of 5% was definitely something to think about. But honestly, those kinds of conditions were only around for about 5 years out of the last 50. For the rest of the time, bonds turned out to be more like wealth destroyers dressed up as safe investments. I saw friends in the 90s and 2000s putting together bond portfolios because their financial advisors told them that at their age, they needed something stable and predictable. Those friends ended up retiring with portfolios that brought in $50,000 or $60,000 a year from bonds. That sounds nice until you realize that $50,000 now buys what $25,000 did when they first retired. Their income stayed the same while their living expenses doubled. Meanwhile, I kept all of my investable cash in stocks. I focused on productive businesses that could raise prices with inflation, boost earnings, and increase dividends. My retirement income grew by 8 to 10% each year, not because I was taking on more risk, but because I realized that the most secure long-term investment is owning productive assets, rather than lending money to borrowers at fixed rates. The bond market, similar to the insurance sector and the mutual fund world, mainly serves to shift wealth from less experienced investors to financial middlemen. When you purchase a bond through a broker, you end up paying a markup, the difference between what the broker originally paid for the bond and the price they charge you. This markup usually ranges from 1 to 3% of the bond's value, which on a bond that yields 4% means you essentially handed over the first year's interest to your broker. Then you have to pay taxes on that interest every year. Plus, inflation chips away at the purchasing power of your initial investment. After accounting for all these expenses, you're fortunate if you even manage to break even in real terms. However, bonds seem secure because their value doesn't swing around like stocks do. This is the biggest psychological trick in finance, getting folks to believe that nominal stability equals real safety. A stock portfolio could take a 30% hit in a rough year, but over 3 decades it tends to grow at around 8 to 10%. On the flip side, a bond portfolio might never see a drop in its nominal value, but over 30 years it could lose about 2 to 3% each year due to inflation and taxes. So, which one is genuinely safe? The one that actually increased your wealth, or the one that seemed stable while making you poorer? I never put more than a tiny slice of my wealth into bonds, and that was just for liquidity, keeping cash on hand for opportunities without needing to sell stocks during tough times. Every dollar I didn't invest in bonds went straight into stocks instead. Over 50 years, that probably made a difference of $30 to $40 million in my net worth. Not because stocks are some kind of magic, but because bonds are mathematically destined to lag behind inflation-adjusted stock returns over the long haul. And I realized that feeling safe isn't the same as being safe. The only way to truly secure your finances is by having productive assets that appreciate in value quicker than inflation. Bonds don't accomplish that. Investing in bonds is like betting that the future is going to be worse than what we've experienced in the past, that economic growth will stall, and that companies will stop innovating. It's a deeply pessimistic approach to investing, and pessimism can be costly. On the other hand, optimism, the belief that human creativity will keep generating value, has been the only sensible investment strategy throughout human history. I went with optimism. I went with businesses. I went with stocks. And as a result, I ended up much wealthier than those who opted for safety, predictability, and bonds. The seventh and final type of investment I steered clear of was probably the hardest to resist emotionally because it wasn't even pitched as an investment. It was presented as a lifestyle choice, a mark of success, a treat you earned after years of hard work. Brand new cars, luxury vehicles, cars that lose value the second you drive them off the lot. This may sound a bit odd when we talk about investment number 6, individual bonds, but that's precisely the idea here. Folks often view cars as investments. They take out loans for them, trade them in, and even upgrade them, even though they rank among the worst financial moves you can make. Let me break down the true expense of a brand new car for you. The typical new car in the United States comes with a price tag of around $48,000. Most people end up financing it over a period of 5 or 6 years at an interest rate between 5 and 7%. By the time you finish paying off that loan, you've forked out $54,000 to $57,000 when you include interest. But wait, that's not the actual cost. The real cost is the opportunity cost. Think about what that money could have turned into if you had invested it instead of throwing it at an asset that loses value. If you invest $48,000 at an annual return of 10%, it grows to $124,000 in 10 years. In 20 years, it balloons to $314,000, and in 30 years, it skyrockets to $815,000. That's not just a small blip. That's your retirement cushion. That's funding for your kids' education. That's the key to financial freedom. So, you end up shelling out cash for a car that might only be worth around $15,000 after a decade. But folks don't really see it that way because cars are a must-have. Plus, getting a new car seems like the smart move. You need something dependable to get around. New cars don't break down as often. You've got that warranty backing you up. Older cars can drain your wallet with repairs. Each of those points is just a way to justify the choice while overlooking the numbers. If I were to start fresh today with nothing, here's my game plan. I'd grab term life insurance if I had people relying on me and steer clear of any permanent insurance. I'd either rent a cozy place or snag a small house that I could pay off quickly. And I'd funnel every dollar I didn't spend on housing into index funds. I wouldn't touch any gold, cryptocurrency, or individual bonds. My focus would be on the cheapest index funds out there, likely a total market index fund, and I'd just hold on to it. I'd get a dependable used car and keep it until it couldn't go anymore. Then I'd find another reliable used car. I'd steer clear of any financial advisor who charges based on a percentage of assets they manage. I used to dive into yearly reports to figure out how companies operate instead of tuning into financial news. I would only spend cash on things that actually brought value: education, health, connections, and tools that boost my earning potential. I aimed to stash away at least half of my income after taxes, and I would stick to this plan for 30 years without straying. The outcome would be financial freedom by my 50s and wealth by my 60s, no matter what my starting salary was, no matter the luck involved, and regardless of when the market was doing its thing. Because the power of compound interest is unbeatable. An 8% return each year doubles your money every 9 years. Over 30 years, that's 3 times it doubles. A single dollar turns into $8. 100,000 becomes 800,000. 500,000 grows to 4 million. The only thing that matters is whether you can steer clear of the 7 wealth destroyers long enough to let compounding do its magic. Most folks can't manage it. They end up buying whole life insurance in their 30s. They invest in real estate in their 40s. They freak out and buy gold during tough times. They pay mutual fund fees for years on end. They ponder over digital currencies. They seek refuge in bonds for security. They purchase new vehicles every 5 years, and they end up retiring at 65 with less than they could have had if they had just invested in an index fund at 25 and left it alone. That's the real tragedy. The answer is straightforward, free, accessible to all, and doesn't need any special skills or knowledge. But it demands the one thing that most folks struggle to maintain: the readiness to disregard traditional wisdom, push back against societal expectations, postpone immediate rewards, think long-term, and be consistently unexciting. I spent 70 years being reliably unexciting. I steered clear of the 7 wealth destroyers. I invested in productive assets and kept them for the long haul.